The phone slipped out of Jack's hand and hit the tile with a sound that felt like a bone breaking. Tu Tien's slippers were gone. Her rice bowl sat half-rinsed, water still clinging to the grains like she'd been yanked mid-breath. Anna stood there holding her daylight paper, eyes too wide for a child, whispering, "Daddy, where's Mommy?" And then the call came. An unknown number, a stranger's voice, calm as winter. "If you want her back, bring the file." In that moment, Jack didn't fear a fight. He feared the silence after a door closes, when love can vanish without even a goodbye. So what happens to a man's soul when the woman he promised to protect is simply gone? Folks, my heart breaks just telling this part. Before we see what happens next, please subscribe to support our stories. Yesterday, Tu Tien painted one narrow strip of the gate. Not to impress anyone, just to prove to herself that fear didn't get the whole house. This afternoon, the strip had dried clean and bright. The yard smelled like winter sun and ginger. Inside, Anna colored another star. Min scooted a spoon across the tiles, laughing like the world was safe. Tu Tien stood at the sink rinsing rice. Her shoulders, usually tight as a knot, were finally lower. Jack left for one small repair part in town. Before he stepped out, he touched her fingers the way he'd started doing lately. Like a vow spoken quietly so the village couldn't steal it. "I leave," he murmured. "I return," she answered. "Safe." She even smiled. "Go," she whispered. "We're okay." He believed her. Mike Delis, he came home less than an hour later with a small bag and a soft smile already forming, ready to bring back normal. "Tu Tien? I'm home." No answer. At first, he tried to keep his voice light, like he didn't want to scare the peace away. "Hey, where are you?" Still nothing. The house made its own sounds. Anna's pencil, Min's babble, the kettle clicking as it cooled. But there was no Tu Tien. No footsteps, no hum, no "I'm here." Jack set the bag down too carefully. His eyes swept the kitchen. The rice bowl sat half-rinsed. A wet cloth lay by the sink, and on the floor, her slippers were gone. His throat tightened. Not the dramatic kind. The kind that makes a person swallow and still feel trapped. "Ly Tu Tien?" he called again, louder. Anna looked up. "Mommy went outside," she said, because children always believe outside means near. "When?" Jack asked, too fast. Anna shrugged. She said, "Back soon." Jack walked into the yard. Empty road, empty bend. The painted strip on the gate caught the sun like a promise, and suddenly felt like a finger pointing at him. "You left." His phone was in his hand before he chose it. He called her. Voicemail. Again. Voicemail. He checked the bedroom, the bathroom, the storage corner. Behind the blinking Christmas lights that still hung like stubborn hope. Nothing. Then he saw it. Tu Tien's phone, face down on the counter near the wet cloth. Jack turned it over with shaking fingers. Dark screen. No new messages. No calls from her. Because she didn't take it. A cold wave moved through his body, fast and nauseating. He picked up Min, pressed his cheek to the child's warm hair and whispered, "It's okay," as if saying it could make it true. But his eyes had already gone far away. He crouched to Anna. His voice came out gentle and broken at the same time. "Did anyone talk to Mommy? Did anyone come to the gate?" Anna's lip trembled. "No, she went." Jack stood up and the world narrowed to one thought. This is not her choosing to leave. This is someone making her leave. He ran out and shouted her name into the road, like love could pull a person back. "Tu Tien!" The village answered with barking dogs and distant clattering. Everything except her voice. He did what panic makes a good man do. He searched like a man trying to outrun his own guilt. Down the road, to the bend, eyes scanning the dirt, the hedges, the side paths. He asked one neighbor, then another, each no landing heavier than the last, until one woman's face changed and she whispered, "Jack." What happened? That was the moment his stomach dropped. Because people don't ask that unless they feel danger too. He ran back. Mom Ly was already there, standing by the gate with her hands clenched together, pale but upright. Anna was tucked against her side. Min sat on the step, rubbing his eyes, confused by the way the air had turned sharp. Mom Ly didn't tell Jack to calm down. She simply grabbed his forearm, firm, grounding. "Breathe," she said. Jack tried. The breath snapped halfway. "I was gone 40 minutes," he choked out. 40. Her eyes shone. "I know. It's my fault," he blurted, because guilt always speaks first. "I left her alone." Mom Ly's voice hardened with love. "No, fear is talking, not truth." Anna looked up at him, tears sliding down her cheeks without sound. "Daddy, where is Mommy?" Jack's face cracked. He forced his voice into something a child could hold. "We're going to find her," he promised. "We are." Mom Ly turned and called Mr. Dung. Then she called Officer Thu. They arrived fast, too fast for comfort, like the village already understood what missing meant. Officer Thu's eyes went straight to the counter. "Phone left behind," she said, clipped and calm. Jack nodded, barely breathing. She wouldn't do that. Mr. Dung spoke low. "A dark car slowed near the bend earlier. No one wrote the plate." Jack's vision blurred. "A car?" he whispered. Officer Thu was already on her phone. "Bend camera," she said. "Now." A message came in. Officer Thu read it, and the calm on her face turned into something colder. "Camera caught a woman in Tu Tien's coat," she said carefully. "Walking fast, toward a parked vehicle. The angle is poor. We need the next camera." Jack gripped the gatepost until his knuckles went white. His mind kept trying to bargain. Maybe it's a mistake. Maybe she's right behind the house. Maybe she... Anna stepped forward and pressed her daylight paper into his hand, like a charm. "Bring Mommy home," she whispered. Jack crushed the paper in his fist, not out of anger, out of terror he couldn't fit anywhere else. And then his phone buzzed. Unknown number. His whole body went still. He answered, voice shaking so badly it barely sounded like him. "Tu Tien." Silence, then a man's voice, low, unfamiliar, spoke as if he had all the time in the world. "If you want her back, bring the file." Jack went cold from the inside out. "The witness statements," the voice added, soft and cruel. "Come alone." The call cut. Jack stared at the dead screen, throat locked, because suddenly he understood. This wasn't a disappearance. It was a message. Jack stood with the phone still in his hand, staring at the dark screen like it was a mouth that had swallowed Tu Tien whole. Officer Thu didn't let him spiral. She took the phone, already tapping. "We trace, we move, and we don't give them the real witness file," she said. Jack's voice came out jagged. "They said bring the file. Come alone." Mom Loy stepped in close, palm pressed to his chest. Firm, grounding, almost angry with love. "You can shake," she whispered, "but you will not walk into darkness and call it devotion." Anna stood by the step, clutching her crumpled daylight paper. Her eyes were too old for her face. "Daddy, Mommy is scared, right?" Jack dropped to his knees. His hands trembled so badly he hid them in his sleeves. "Yes, baby," he admitted, "but Mommy is strong, and we're bringing her home." Anna pushed the paper toward him like a charm. "Tell her I kept the stars." Jack slid it into his jacket pocket and swallowed a sob. Officer Thu handed him a thin folder. "Copies. You hand these over. You'll look like you obeyed. You won't be alone. Only the appearance will be." Jack hated the word. He hated tricks. But he hated the idea of Tu Tien's breath being negotiated even more. Mom Loy gripped his forearm. "Say it," she demanded, voice shaking. Jack forced the ritual out through a throat full of panic. "I leave," Mom Loy answered, eyes shining. "You return." "Safe," Jack finished, and it sounded like a plea. He kissed Anna's forehead, Min's hair, and walked out before his legs gave out. Tu Tien sat in a small room that smelled like dust and old paper. An office meant for signatures, turned into a cage. They had taken her phone first. Then they had said the children's names in that casual, cruel way, like they were testing which wound would open fastest. Tu Tien didn't scream. She refused to feed them that. She breathed in tiny pieces and repeated in her head, "I am still here. I am still here." A man came in. Ordinary face, ordinary jacket. That was the horror. How normal cruelty can look. "He'll come," he said softly. "That CEO man." Tu Tien lifted her chin. "Then you should be afraid," she whispered. "Because you're not stealing a woman. You're stealing a mother." His smile thinned. "We're stealing paper," he said. "And you're the weight." The meeting place was the mediation office by the market road, where people used to beg for fairness and walk out with shame. Jack stepped into the hallway with the folder under his arm. Two men waited. "Alone?" one asked, eyes scanning behind Jack. Jack forced air into his lungs. "Yes." Give it," the man said, impatience breaking through the calm. "Show me her," Jack answered, voice low. A door opened. Tu Tien sat on a chair, wrists bound, hair messy, cheeks pale. But her eyes were alive, painfully alive. She shook her head once, tiny and urgent. "Don't." Jack's chest seized. Tu Tien, he whispered, and it sounded like a vow failing in his mouth. The man leaned close. Hand it over, or she stays. Jack's fingers loosened. Then Officer Thu's voice cut through the hallway, steady, unafraid. Hands where I can see them. She stepped in with officers. Mr. Dung followed. Outside, neighbors gathered at the doorway, phones up, faces hard. No shouting, just witnesses. The kidnapper snapped. He said alone. Officer Thu didn't blink. He is. You didn't say I couldn't be nearby. For one sharp breath, the air turned razor thin. One man reached toward Tu Tien like she was still a shield. Mr. Dung's voice warned, "Don't!" The officers moved. Cuffs clicked. Not dramatic, final. Jack didn't feel triumph. He felt his knees go weak with relief, so violent it almost hurt. Officer Thu nodded. Go. Jack crossed the hallway and knelt in front of Tu Tien. His hands hovered over the rope, terrified of hurting her. I'm here, he whispered. I'm here. Tu Tien's pride tried to hold her tears back and failed. Don't talk, she rasped. Just take me home. Jack fumbled the knot. When the rope fell away, Tu Tien's hands collapsed into his, trembling. Her shoulders shook, silent and deep, like her body finally admitted what her mouth refused to say. Jack pulled her into his arms, careful, desperate. You don't carry this alone, he whispered into her hair. They said Anna, Tu Tien breathed, breaking. They said the children. I went because I couldn't risk it. Jack's arms tightened. You went because you're a mother, he said. That's not weakness. That's love. Mom Loy reached them and wrapped both of them in her shaking arms. You're here, she whispered. You're here. Tu Tien let out one small, ruined sob. At home, Anna was waiting on the step, tear tracks dried and fresh tears starting again. The second she saw Tu Tien, she made a sound that wasn't a word, relief cracking into a cry. Mommy! She ran so hard, she nearly fell. Tu Tien dropped to her knees and caught her, arms closing like a door that would never open again. Anna clung to her as if letting go could make her vanish. I thought the gate swallowed you, Anna sobbed. I thought daylight didn't work. Tu Tien kissed her child's hair again and again. No, my love, she whispered. Daylight works. Sometimes it just has to chase. Min toddled over and grabbed Tu Tien's sleeve, whining. She pulled him into the hug, and the weight of both children against her chest made her believe she was real again. Jack stood behind them, one hand braced on the doorframe. His face looked hollow with guilt. Tu Tien looked up at him. Her voice went soft. You're shaking. Jack swallowed hard. I left for 40 minutes, he whispered, and the world tried to punish us for it. Tu Tien reached for his hand. The world didn't win, she said. Because you came back. Mom Loy walked to the gate and touched the painted strip with her fingertips. Tomorrow, she said, voice rough. We paint another one. Tu Tien blinked through tears. Why? Because this house will not be remembered by what tried to take you, Mom Loy said. It will be remembered by what couldn't. Jack squeezed Tu Tien's hand. His voice was barely there. I leave. Tu Tien squeezed back. You return. Anna sniffed hard. lifted her chin like a tiny judge, and finished it for them. Safe, Tu Tien laughed and cried at the same time, pressing the crumpled daylight paper to her heart. Yes, she whispered. Safe